Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like to live in space? Not just the weightlessness we see in videos, but the profound sense of isolation, the disorientation, the quiet ache for something familiar. For decades, our focus has been on the technical challenges of space travel, the rockets, the life support, the engineering marvels that keep humans alive beyond Earth. But there's a deeper, more human challenge we're only beginning to address. How do we design environments that don't just sustain our bodies, but nurture our minds and souls? Imagine floating inside a space station, surrounded by cold, metallic surfaces and endless modules that all look the same. You're not just weightless, you're emotionally untethered, cut off from the sensory richness of Earth. But what if the architecture around you could change that? What if the curves of a wall, the angle of a corridor, or the way light falls across a room could make you feel grounded, connected, even at home? This is the promise of emotional geometry, a revolutionary approach to space architecture that uses shapes, lines, and spatial relationships to evoke specific feelings and psychological responses. It's not just about building structures that withstand the vacuum of space. It's about designing habitats that speak to us on an instinctual level, creating gravity you can feel even when there is none. In this video, we'll explore how futuristic designs are harnessing the power of emotional geometry to evoke comfort, awe, and belonging in zero-gravity environments. We'll dive into the science behind how our brains respond to certain forms, why a curved ceiling might calm us while an angular one energizes us, and how architects are blending principles from psychology, neuroscience, and art to craft spaces that feel less like machines and more like homes among the stars. This isn't just about making space stations prettier. It's about ensuring our long-term survival and well-being as we venture farther into the cosmos. From the International Space Station to conceptual habitats on Mars, emotional geometry is emerging as an essential tool for reducing stress, fostering social cohesion, and helping astronauts thrive in the most isolating conditions imaginable. We'll uncover how something as simple as the placement of a window or the texture of a surface can transform cold metal into warm, inviting spaces, and why this human-centered approach may be the key to unlocking our future beyond Earth. So join me on this journey as we reveal how the very shapes around us can simulate gravity's emotional pull, and why designing for the human spirit is the next great frontier in space exploration. At its heart, emotional geometry is the art and science of shaping space to shape our feelings. Think about the last time you walked into a grand cathedral, your eyes naturally drawn upward by the soaring arches, perhaps feeling a sense of awe or quiet reverence. Or consider the cozy, enclosed feeling of a reading nook with a low, curved ceiling that seems to hug you. These aren't accidental experiences. They are the direct result of intentional design choices using form and space. Emotional geometry takes this ancient understanding and applies it with new precision, especially for environments where our earthly instincts are completely upended. It's the deliberate selection of curves over corners, of asymmetry over perfect balance, of light and shadow playing across surfaces in a way that guides not just our eyes but our emotions. This approach is fundamentally interdisciplinary, weaving together threads from environmental psychology, which studies how our surroundings affect our minds, from neuroscience, which reveals how our brains process spatial information, and from architecture, which brings these insights into physical form. The goal is to create places that feel intuitively right, that resonate with us on a level deeper than conscious thought. Our brains come pre-wired with certain responses to geometric patterns, a legacy of evolution that helped our ancestors navigate and find safety in the natural world. Sharp, jagged angles can trigger a subtle alertness, a remnant of a time when such shapes might have signaled danger, like thorns or rocky cliffs. In contrast, soft, undulating curves often evoke a sense of calm and safety, reminiscent of rolling hills or gentle waves. Space architects leverage these deep-seated biases. In a habitat millions of miles from Earth, a corridor with harsh, repetitive right angles might subconsciously contribute to feelings of monotony or anxiety. But that same corridor, redesigned with a gently curving pathway and varied ceiling heights, can create a sense of journey and discovery, turning a simple walk into a more engaging and comforting experience. It's about using the language of form to communicate safety, community, and purpose to the most ancient parts of our brain. Consider the specific emotional impacts of different shapes. A dome overhead doesn't just provide structural strength. Its encompassing form can create a feeling of protection and unity, making it an ideal geometry for a communal gathering space. On the other hand, a workspace designed for focus and innovation might incorporate more dynamic angles and intersecting lines, subtly promoting alertness and creative thinking. Even the absence of a traditional up and down in microgravity doesn't mean we abandon these principles. Instead, emotional geometry provides the visual and tactile cues that help our brain construct a new sense of orientation. A textured pathway on what is designated as the floor, a gradient of light that brightens toward a ceiling, or a centralized object that acts as a focal point. All these geometric strategies help ground us emotionally when physical gravity cannot. Ultimately, this is about closing the profound gap between sterile functionality and human warmth. For too long, space habitats were designed like machines for living, prioritizing engineering efficiency above all else. But we are not machines. We are emotional beings who need connection, comfort, and beauty to truly thrive. Emotional geometry is the tool that allows architects to build that humanity directly into the blueprint, to craft environments that actively support mental health, foster social bonds, and reduce the psychological strain of isolation. It transforms a metal module from a mere shelter into a sanctuary, a place that doesn't just keep you alive, but helps you feel alive. This foundational concept sets the stage for everything to come, as we explore how these abstract principles are being translated into the tangible reality of our future homes among the stars. Think about the last time you walked into a vast, open plaza or a grand, airy museum atrium. There's a good chance you felt a subtle lift in your spirits, a sense of possibility. Now contrast that with the feeling of being in a cramped, windowless room with low ceilings and uniform lighting. Even if it's perfectly safe, that environment might after a while breed a sense of restlessness or unease. This isn't just a personal quirk, it's a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Our brains are exquisitely tuned to our surroundings, constantly processing spatial information on a subconscious level. Cramped, monotonous environments can trigger a low-grade stress response, a feeling of being trapped that over time can contribute to anxiety and even depression. Conversely, spaces that offer variety, openness, and a connection to the outside world have been shown to lower cortisol levels, improve cognitive function, and foster both creativity and a sense of calm. This is the powerful psychological interplay between us and the built environment, a dance of perception and emotion that happens every moment we inhabit a space. Now amplify those earthly sensations by 1,000, and you begin to grasp the psychological challenge of living in space. Astronauts aren't just dealing with a small room, they're facing the ultimate isolation, the profound confinement of being sealed inside a metallic shell hurtling through a vacuum, with the vibrant blue marble of Earth visible but utterly out of reach. The monotony can be crushing every day, the same modules, the same equipment, the same lack of environmental change. In these extreme conditions, the risk of what psychologists call environmental depression is very real. A poorly designed habitat isn't just an inconvenience, it becomes an active threat to mission success and crew well-being. This is why designing for emotional well-being transitions from a luxury to an absolute critical necessity. It's a matter of psychological life support. This is precisely where the principles of emotional geometry become a powerful countermeasure. It's the deliberate use of design to combat the mental fatigue of confinement. Where a space might be physically small, strategic asymmetry can break up sightlines and create a sense of visual intrigue, making a module feel larger and more dynamic than its actual dimensions. Think of a corridor that isn't a straight, predictable tube but instead features a gently curving path that reveals new areas gradually, turning a simple transit into a small journey of discovery. Or consider the use of concentric circles in a common area, a design pattern seen everywhere from ancient amphitheaters to modern town squares. This geometry naturally draws the eye to a central point, creating a focal point for social interaction and evoking a deep, instinctual sense of safety and shared focus. It tells the subconscious mind this is a place to gather, to connect, to be a community. The effectiveness of this approach isn't just theoretical. NASA and other space agencies have spent decades studying crew psychology, and their research consistently shows that astronauts in modules with thoughtful design elements, things like private, personalized sleep pods, common areas with distinct zones, and the invaluable presence of a cupola window looking back at Earth, report significantly higher morale, better teamwork, and greater overall productivity. They are literally performing better because their environment is supporting their mental state. This wisdom of shaping space to shape emotion is actually an ancient practice. We've been doing it on Earth for millennia. The architects of Gothic cathedrals didn't just want to build a roof over people's heads. They used soaring vaulted ceilings and ethereal light filtering through stained glass to inspire awe and a feeling of connection to the divine. The builders of the Pantheon in Rome used its breathtaking oculus and perfect proportions to create a sense of cosmic order and grandeur. They were masters of emotional geometry, using stone and light to manipulate human feeling. Today, we are simply taking that ancient, intuitive understanding and applying it with scientific precision to a new frontier. We're using these insights to ensure that every corner of an extraterrestrial habitat, from the galley to the research lab, feels intentional, nurturing, and human-centric. We are building the cathedrals of the cosmos, designed not for gods but for the human spirit. Here on Earth, gravity is the invisible architect of our entire sensory experience. It is the constant, unwavering force that gives us a definitive sense of up and down, that makes a floor feel solid and a ceiling feel overhead. It's the reason we intuitively understand stability and balance. This gravitational reference is so deeply ingrained in our neurology that we are seldom even aware of it until it's gone. The moment an astronaut enters microgravity, this fundamental anchor vanishes. Without that persistent downward pull, the brain's most basic spatial mapping systems are thrown into confusion. Visual cues and inner ear signals, which on Earth work in perfect harmony, suddenly conflict. The result is more than just physical disorientation. It's a profound emotional drift, that feeling of being utterly untethered, of floating in a world without a true floor or ceiling, can lead to a deep-seated sense of instability that permeates one's entire psyche. It's a background hum of unease, a subtle but constant reminder that you are in an environment for which your species did not evolve. This is the monumental challenge that emotional geometry seeks to solve. If we cannot provide real gravity, we can instead design a persuasive illusion of it, crafting an environment that speaks the brain's native language of stability and orientation. The tools for this are visual and tactile cues carefully embedded into the architecture. A floor might subtly slope or be textured with a distinct pattern that visually defines it as the surface for walking, or in this case, floating along. Overhead lighting can be arranged to create a gradient, brighter in one direction to simulate a sky and darker in another to suggest a ground, providing a clear visual up and down. Even the color palette can be employed strategically, with darker, heavier colors used below and lighter, airier tones above, reinforcing that gravitational hierarchy our brains so desperately crave. Consider the powerful effect of vertical elements. On Earth, columns, pillars, and the sheer walls of buildings are constant reminders of the vertical axis defined by gravity. In a space station, architects can reintroduce this concept. A support beam, a bank of storage lockers, or even a strategically placed piece of artwork can be arranged vertically, creating a powerful visual line that the brain latches onto as a reference for up. This simple design choice helps combat the queasy feeling of vertigo by giving the eyes a fixed point of orientation, allowing mind to construct a stable mental map of the surroundings. This isn't just about making a space easier to navigate physically, it's about providing emotional comfort. When your brain can successfully impose order on the chaos of weightlessness, a sense of control returns. That control is the antidote to the anxiety of disorientation. This approach brilliantly supports both physical adaptation and emotional resilience. A crew member who feels spatially confident is less prone to motion sickness and more efficient in their movements, conserving precious energy and focus. But more importantly, they feel more at home. By creating these familiar cues, emotional geometry bridges the vast experiential gap between Earth and space. An environment that feels intentionally ordered and stable ceases to feel purely alien and starts to feel secure, even welcoming. It becomes a place where one can relax, not just function. This foundational understanding that we can design for the emotional experience of gravity, not just the physical reality of it, is what allows today's visionaries to completely rethink how we build for life off-world. They are moving beyond mere engineering to create habitats that feel intuitively right, crafting a sense of place and belonging from the geometry of the walls themselves. This deep-seated human connection to form isn't a new discovery invented for the space age. It is a thread woven through the entire tapestry of human history. For millennia, master builders and architects on Earth have intuitively understood the power of geometry to shape not just buildings, but the very feelings of those who walk within them. They were the original practitioners of emotional geometry, crafting stone and wood into experiences. Consider the immense Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe. Their architects didn't merely aim to create a shelter, they used ribbed vaults and impossibly tall, pointed arches to draw the eye and the spirit heavenward. The intended emotional response was awe, humility, and a profound sense of transcendence, making the divine feel tangibly close. Centuries earlier, the architects of ancient Greece employed a different geometric language to achieve a different emotional state. Their temples were designed with precise mathematical ratios, like the famous golden section, to create a visual harmony that felt perfectly balanced to the human eye. Walking among these structures, one didn't feel dwarfed by the divine, but rather elevated into a state of rational order and serene balance. The geometry itself promoted a sense of peace and intellectual clarity. This timeless practice found new expression in the visions of more recent pioneers. the 20th century inventor and architect Buckminster Fuller looked at the natural world and saw unparalleled efficiency and strength in its geometric patterns. His geodesic domes, constructed from a complex network of triangles, were not just structurally sound. Their spherical, encompassing form created a unique psychological effect. Being inside a geodesic dome often evokes a sense of unity, protection, and connection, as if one is inside a giant, benevolent bubble. It's a feeling that is both futuristic and deeply comforting. At around the same time, the Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí was turning the city of Barcelona into a showcase of organic, biomorphic forms. He rejected the straight line, declaring it a man-made artifice, and instead filled his buildings with undulating curves, spiral staircases, and columns that branched like trees. The emotional impact is immediate and visceral. His buildings feel alive, playful, and strangely natural, as if they grew from the ground rather than being built upon it. Gaudí demonstrated how structure and raw emotion could be completely intertwined, a lesson that resonates powerfully with designers today who want to avoid the cold, artificial feel of early space modules. Modern space architects are direct heirs to this rich legacy. They are actively mining these historical and natural precedents to solve the unique psychological challenges of space. One of the most powerful tools they are adopting is the use of fractal patterns. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. Think of the branching of a tree, the veins in a leaf, or the intricate coastline of a fjord. Our human brains are remarkably adept at processing fractals, and research suggests that exposure to these natural patterns can significantly reduce stress levels. By incorporating fractal designs into everything from the layout of a corridor to the pattern on a wall panel, space architects can tap into this subconscious comfort. It's a way of bringing a piece of Earth's inherent visual language into the metal confines of a spaceship, providing a subtle but constant connection to the world we evolved to inhabit. This historical context does more than just provide a library of design ideas. It validates the entire endeavor. It proves that the desire to shape our emotional state through our surroundings is a fundamental and enduring human impulse. The Gothic arch, the Greek column, Fuller's dome, and Gaudí's curves all tell us that we have always sought to build more than mere shelter. We build meaning. By studying why these ancient forms still resonate with us today, we gain a deeper understanding of the universal geometric language of emotion. This allows us to apply those lessons with intention and scientific rigor, ensuring that the habitats we create for the final frontier are not only marvels of engineering but also feel genuinely, deeply human. They become the next chapter in a story that began with the very first structure built to inspire a feeling, connecting the cathedrals of our past to the starships of our future. The International Space Station stands as a towering achievement of engineering and international cooperation, a marvel of functionality that has kept humans alive and working in orbit for decades. Yet, for all its technical brilliance, it presents a fascinating case study in the raw, unvarnished clash between machine-like efficiency and human emotional needs. Its interior is a labyrinth of modules that prioritize cabling, equipment racks, and instrument panels above all else, resulting in an environment that many astronauts have described as inherently sterile, visually chaotic, and at times overwhelmingly utilitarian. Every surface is spoken for, every corner optimized for a technical purpose, leaving little room for the human spirit to breathe. This is architecture designed by engineers for machines, with humans as necessary but often secondary occupants. The emotional experience can be one of sensory overload mixed with profound monotony, a constant barrage of beiges and grays, sharp metallic edges, and the ever-present hum of machinery. with no visual respite from the sheer business of staying alive. But within this machine, the seeds of emotional geometry have been quietly, almost accidentally, planted. The most profound example is perhaps the simplest and most powerful, the Cupola. This now famous windowed module, added years after the station's initial construction, was intended for robotic operations, but it swiftly became something far more vital, the station's emotional heart. Astronauts report spending their precious free time drifting before its 7 windows, not just for the operational view, but for the soul-stirring, awe-inspiring vista of Earth rolling by below. This single architectural feature, this deliberate opening to the outside, provides an emotional anchor that no internal design could ever replicate. It offers perspective, connection, and a breathtaking reminder of home, directly countering the isolation and confinement of the metal shell around them. Its circular, encompassing design creates a natural gathering point, a place for quiet contemplation or shared wonder, proving that a view is not a luxury but a psychological necessity. Beyond the Cupola, we see smaller, more subtle attempts to inject humanity into the machine. The crew quarters, for instance, are small personal pods, but they are designed as sanctuaries from the communal bustle. They use soft, diffused lighting instead of the harsh fluorescence found in the labs, immediately creating a calmer, more intimate atmosphere. They are also highly personalizable. Astronauts are encouraged to bring photos, small mementos, and even choose their own music or video playlists to project on their laptops. This ability to customize a tiny piece of their environment is a critical form of emotional self-regulation, allowing them to create a pocket of earthly familiarity and personal identity amidst the standardized modules. It's a tacit acknowledgement that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for human psychology. We also see the early application of organizational color coding throughout the station. Different modules or sections might use distinct colored panels or tape on handrails to help with orientation and navigation in the disorienting microgravity environment. While primarily functional, this use of color breaks up the visual monotony and provides intuitive wayfinding cues that reduce cognitive load and the underlying stress of getting lost in your own home. Even the design of handholds shows a glimmer of geometric consideration. While many are simple utilitarian bars, some are curved or contoured to fit the human hand more naturally. This small touch transforms a piece of safety equipment into something that feels less like a tool and more like an extension of the body, a subtle but meaningful interaction that fosters a sense of familiarity and ease. The testimony of astronauts themselves provides the most compelling evidence for these emotional cues. Time and again, they return to Earth speaking not just of the scientific work, but of the profound emotional impact of these design elements. They describe how gazing out the window was a daily ritual for mental health, how their personalized sleep station was a crucial refuge, and how the simple curve of a frequently used handhold became a small, comforting point of contact in an otherwise hard-edged world. These aren't minor anecdotes, they are vital data points highlighting that even the most minimal, almost unintentional, application of emotional design has an outsized impact on morale and well-being. The IS, therefore, is not a failure of design but an invaluable teacher. Its limitations show us the stark consequences of prioritizing pure function over emotional form. Its successes, however accidental, prove the incredible power of even the smallest human-centric gestures. It stands as a living laboratory that has taught us one undeniable lesson. For long-duration spaceflight to be sustainable, we cannot just build machines for living. We must learn to build homes for the human heart, and that process begins with intentional, thoughtful, emotional geometry. The ISS paved the way, and now we must build upon its lessons. So how do we translate these powerful psychological insights into a practical design language for building homes in the void? The answer lies in a set of core principles that act as the foundational toolkit for emotional geometry. These are not arbitrary aesthetic choices, but are instead deeply rooted in how our brains perceive and respond to the built environment. Principles that must be masterfully adapted for the unique reality of microgravity. Take the concept of symmetry. On Earth, we often associate symmetry with balance, order, and formal beauty. Think of the grand facade of a palace or the layout of a traditional garden. In the weightless world of a space habitat, symmetry takes on a new and critical role. It provides a visual anchor, a point of reference that helps the brain establish order amidst the potential chaos of floating in 3 dimensions. A symmetrical layout around a central axis, perhaps defined by a main thoroughfare or a central common area, creates an intuitive mental map of the entire habitat. This isn't about creating boring, mirrored spaces. It's about using balanced forms to generate a subconscious feeling of stability and predictability, which is profoundly comforting when your physical reality is anything but. Then there is the principle of rhythm, achieved through the careful use of repeating patterns. In a long, tubular module, a common shape in spacecraft due to structural efficiency, the risk of a monotonous, tunnel-like experience is high. Rhythm is the antidote. By introducing a repeating sequence of elements, perhaps a pattern of softly illuminated archways, a rhythmic change in wall panel textures, or a series of gently alcoved workspaces, designers can create a sense of flow and progression. This rhythmic pattern breaks the monotony, giving the eye and the mind a journey to follow. It transforms a potentially disorienting tube into a navigable path with a clear beginning, middle, and end, making the space feel purposeful and engaging rather than endless and confining. Perhaps the most crucial principle for making any environment feel welcoming is proportion, specifically human-scaled proportion. There's a reason why massive, cavernous halls can feel awe-inspiring but also intimidating and cold, while extremely cramped spaces induce claustrophobia. The sweet spot is designing spaces that feel tailored to human dimensions, even in microgravity where we don't stand but float. This is where timeless concepts like the golden ratio come into play. Room dimensions, the size of a window in relation to a wall, or the layout of a common area that follows these harmonious proportions, have been shown to feel inherently pleasing and comfortable to the human brain on a subconscious level. Furthermore, varied ceiling heights can be used to brilliantly define zones for different emotional needs without the need for physical walls. A lower, more enclosed ceiling over a sleeping pod or a private reading nook creates a sense of intimacy, security, and retreat. In contrast, a high, vaulted ceiling in a galley or observation lounge evokes a feeling of community, openness, and gathering. This variation in volume allows inhabitants to subconsciously understand the purpose of a space and how they should feel within it simply by its proportions. In microgravity, these principles require clever adaptation. The classic right-angled corridor intersection, so common on Earth, becomes a point of jarring impact and disorientation when you're floating through it. The emotional geometry solution is to replace those harsh angles with soft, curved pathways. These sweeping curves guide movement fluidly and intuitively, allowing a floating body to drift around a corner gracefully rather than bumping into it. They eliminate visual sharpness that can trigger subconscious alarm and replace it with a flowing, organic sense of ease. Woven throughout all these principles is the powerful idea of biophilic design, the intentional incorporation of natural forms, patterns, and materials. In the utterly artificial environment of a spaceship, the absence of nature is a profound stressor. Biophilic design seeks to remedy this by bringing the geometry of nature indoors. This could mean using a branching, tree-like structural support column instead of a straight I-beam, patterning a floor after the fractal arrangement of leaves, or using a color palette drawn from earth, stone, and sky. These aren't just decorative touches, they are direct lines back to our evolutionary home. Our brains are hardwired to find comfort and interest in the complex, non-repeating patterns of the natural world. By embedding these forms into the architecture, we tap into a deep well of psychological comfort, reducing stress and fostering a connection to the world we left behind, making the metal shell around us feel just a little less alien and a little more like a natural extension of ourselves. But light is so much more than just a tool for visibility. It is the very brushstroke that paints emotion onto the geometry of a space. It has the transformative power to alter our perception of form, scale, and atmosphere in an instant. On Earth, we take for granted the ever-changing drama of natural light, the soft, diffuse glow of a cloudy day that can feel contemplative, or the sharp, long shadows of a late afternoon sun that add a touch of mystery and depth to a room. This dynamic interplay is a fundamental part of our psychological well-being, a constant, rhythmic dance that grounds us in the passage of time. In the stark, unchanging void of space, this vital connection is completely severed. There is no sunrise to gently coax us from sleep, no gradual dimming of dusk to signal our bodies to wind down. Inside a habitat without intentional design, the lighting could be a perpetual, flat, and soul-crushingly monotonous fluorescent noon. This isn't just an aesthetic problem. It's a profound physiological and psychological challenge that emotional geometry must solve. The first and most critical role of light in a space habitat is to become a substitute for the sun, acting as a master regulator for the human body's internal clock. Our circadian rhythms, which govern our sleep-wake cycles, hormone release, and overall mood, are exquisitely tuned to the natural cycle of light and dark. Disrupt this cycle, as astronauts do with multiple sunrises and sunsets each day in orbit, and the consequences can be severe: sleep deprivation, cognitive fog, irritability, and a weakened immune system. The solution is biodynamic lighting systems, sophisticated networks of tunable LED lights that are programmed to faithfully mimic the natural progression of a 24-hour day. This means beginning the morning with a low-intensity, warm, reddish glow that gradually intensifies and shifts to a cooler, blue-white spectrum to promote alertness and focus during the main work period. As the evening approaches, the lights would slowly warm again and dim, encouraging the production of melatonin and preparing the mind and body for restful sleep. This artificial sun isn't just a light source. It's a non-negotiable piece of biological life support, a rhythmic pulse that brings the comforting, familiar order of an earthly day into the timelessness of space. Beyond this essential biological function, light becomes the primary tool for sculpting emotion and enhancing the architectural forms themselves. This is where the true artistry of emotional geometry comes into play. Directional lighting is like a highlighter for the soul of a space. By carefully aiming light across a curved, organic wall, an architect can emphasize its soft, flowing form, making the surface appear to breathe and creating gentle gradients of light and shadow that feel inherently warm and welcoming. This technique can make even a metallic surface feel soft and inviting. Conversely, using a sharper, more focused light to graze across an angular, geometric feature can cast dramatic, well-defined shadows that highlight its precision and dynamism. This might be perfect for a research lab or an exercise area, where the desired emotional state is one of focused energy and alertness. The strategic placement of light can also create powerful illusions of depth and volume. Lighting a far wall or the end of a corridor can make a space feel much larger and more expansive, countering the very real physical constraints of the habitat and preventing feelings of claustrophobia. It creates visual destinations, inviting exploration and making the environment feel dynamic and engaging rather than static and closed off. The most advanced habitats will move beyond a single, fixed lighting script for the entire station. Imagine an environment that is truly responsive, where the lighting adapts not just to the time of day, but to the specific needs and activities of the crew. A tunable LED grid could allow different modules or even different zones within a module to have their own unique lighting conditions. The galley during a communal meal might be bathed in a warm, golden light that stimulates appetite and conversation, fostering a sense of camaraderie. Meanwhile, an astronaut needing a moment of quiet contemplation could retreat to a nook where the lighting is soft, diffuse, and slightly dimmed, promoting calm and introspection. If a particular task requires extreme concentration, the lighting in that work area could intensify to a bright, cool white to maximize visual acuity and mental focus. This level of customization transforms the habitat from a passive container into an active partner in well-being. The interplay between the solid, physical geometry of the walls and the ethereal, dynamic geometry of light is what ultimately creates an environment that feels truly alive and human-centric. It's the difference between a drawing and a sculpture. Light adds the depth, the shadow, the highlight, and the mood that makes the space feel not just built but truly felt. While the geometry of a space sets the stage for our emotions, the materials that clothe those forms determine the final, felt experience. They are the tactile interface between the cold, hard logic of engineering and the warm, soft needs of the human spirit. Every surface we touch or see communicates a subtle message through its texture, its warmth, its sound, and its sheen. A polished, cool-to-the-touch metallic wall might feel impeccably clean and highly efficient, perfect for a laboratory setting where precision is paramount. But that same material, if used throughout a living quarters, would quickly become emotionally sterile and unwelcoming. In contrast, imagine running your hand along a wall panel crafted from a wood composite. Even if it's a synthetic material engineered for durability, its grain pattern and warmer thermal conductivity send a powerful subconscious signal of nature, of earth, of home. It transforms a module from a machine into a place of respite. Fabric panels on a ceiling or wall do more than just look soft. They absorb harsh reverberations and break up the visual monotony of hard surfaces, creating acoustic and visual pockets of calm that are crucial for mental well-being over long missions. These choices are not merely aesthetic luxuries, they are critical engineering challenges in the extreme environment of space. Every gram counts during launch, and every material must withstand massive temperature swings, radiation, and the constant threat of micrometeoroids. This is where innovation meets emotion head-on. Scientists and architects are pioneering astonishing new materials that satisfy both the strict physical requirements and the deep psychological ones. They are developing 3D printed ceramics that can be formed into complex, organic textures reminiscent of stone or coral, providing visual interest and a satisfying, solid feel underhand. Light-diffusing polymers are being created to act as faux skylights or windows, spreading a soft, naturalistic glow that feels infinitely more comforting than the stark beam of an LED. These materials aren't just imitations of earthly things, they are clever evocations designed to trigger the same positive emotional responses within the constraints of the final frontier. Perhaps one of the most overlooked yet vital roles of material choice is in the management of sound. A space habitat is a symphony of constant mechanical noise, the hum of life support systems, the whir of computer fans, the clatter of equipment. Unchecked, this auditory assault becomes a relentless source of low-grade stress, fraying nerves and disrupting concentration. This is where material selection becomes a direct tool for promoting calm. Sound-absorbing acoustic panels, perhaps covered in a soft, textured fabric, can be strategically placed to dampen these noises, turning a harsh, reverberant echo chamber into a peaceful, quiet sanctuary. The difference in the emotional tone of a space is profound. It's the difference between trying to relax in a bustling airport and settling into a quiet library. The architecture of the room might be similar, but the material choices completely define the experience. By thoughtfully selecting materials that work in concert with the geometric design, space architects are no longer just designing a visual environment. They are crafting a holistic, multisensory experience where sight, touch, and sound all align to reinforce a single, powerful emotional cue that this place, however far from home, is a place of comfort, safety, and intentional care. Now, let's consider how this understanding of color transforms when gravity is no longer a factor. In the weightless realm of a spacecraft, our traditional earthly cues for orientation vanish. There is no clear floor or ceiling in the conventional sense, which can lead to a subtle but persistent sense of disorientation. This is where color steps in to become a fundamental tool for wayfinding and psychological grounding. A designer might use a distinct, earthy tan color on all surfaces designated as the floor, creating a visual plane that the brain can latch onto as a stable reference point. Conversely, a lighter, sky blue hue could be applied to ceiling surfaces, intuitively reinforcing a sense of up and down. This strategic application of color does more than just prevent astronauts from bumping into walls. It actively constructs a visual hierarchy that brings order to the potential chaos of three-dimensional living, providing a crucial layer of emotional stability. The psychological impact of color palettes is further illustrated by research conducted in some of Earth's most extreme analog environments. Studies in Antarctic research stations, nuclear submarines, and other long-duration isolation facilities consistently reveal a common challenge. Environmental monotony is a profound threat to mental health. In these settings where the view outside rarely changes and the interior is a repetitive landscape of equipment and walls, the introduction of deliberate color variety is not a decorative afterthought. It is a critical countermeasure. A splash of a warm, energizing color like sunflower yellow in a communal dining area can stimulate appetite and conversation, fostering social bonds. Meanwhile, the quiet solitude of a sleeping pod painted in a deep, muted slate blue can significantly enhance the quality of rest by promoting a sense of calm and detachment from the busy work areas. These lessons, learned in the icy silence of the poles or the depths of the ocean, are directly applicable to the metal hulls of space habitats, proving that color is a vital component in the toolkit against isolation fatigue. Looking forward, space architects are moving beyond static color schemes towards truly dynamic and responsive environments. Imagine walls embedded with advanced micro-LED technology that can shift their entire color palette based on the time of day, the current mission phase, or even the collective mood of the crew. During a high-intensity period of scientific research, the lighting and wall colors in the lab module could emit a bright, cool white tinged with energetic citrus tones to promote focus and alertness. Later, as the crew prepares for a shared meal and relaxation, the same space could gradually transition to a warm, dimmable amber glow, signaling a shift from work to community and rest. This adaptability extends to personal quarters, where an astronaut might have the agency to customize their immediate surroundings, choosing a calming seafoam green one day and an invigorating coral hue the next. This level of personalization and environmental responsiveness ensures that the habitat itself feels like a living, breathing partner in the mission, actively working to support the crew's psychological rhythm and combat the sensory deprivation of space. This fusion of dynamic color with intentional geometry creates a deeply holistic experience where every visual element works in concert to craft an environment that feels not just designed but truly alive. Furniture on Earth is fundamentally designed around a single, relentless force, gravity. A chair exists to support our weight against a downward pull, a table provides a stable horizontal surface, and a bookshelf stands vertically to hold objects in place. But remove that constant gravitational anchor, and every assumption we have about furniture is turned literally upside down. In the weightless environment of a space habitat, a traditional chair is not just useless, it's a bizarre, obstructive relic. This demands a complete reimagining, a shift from seeing furniture as static, grounded objects to understanding them as dynamic elements that choreograph movement and sculpt social interaction in 3 dimensions. Emotional geometry provides the design language for this revolution, guiding the creation of forms that don't fight the freedom of microgravity, but instead harness it to foster comfort, connection, and psychological well-being. The guiding principle becomes flow. On Earth, we walk along a 2-dimensional plane. In microgravity, we fly through a 3-dimensional volume. Furniture must therefore be designed to facilitate this graceful, fluid movement, not hinder it. This means eliminating the harsh, obstructive edges and 90-degree angles of terrestrial design and replacing them with soft, sweeping curves that guide a drifting body intuitively. Imagine a corridor not as a straight tube with sharp corners, but as a gently curving pathway. The walls themselves might feature gracefully arched handholds, contoured to fit the palm, that allow an astronaut to pull themselves along with a natural, swimming motion. These are no longer mere rails, they are invitations to move, designed to make transit feel like a gentle dance rather than a clumsy series of bumps and corrections. This prioritization of fluid shapes does more than prevent bruises. It subconsciously communicates that the environment is designed for your body's new reality, reducing frustration and fostering a sense of effortless mastery over the space. This philosophy extends powerfully to social spaces. Consider the design of a common area where the crew gathers for meals or meetings. A standard rectangular table, a staple of earthly interaction, creates an inherent hierarchy in gravity. There is a head, a foot, sides. In microgravity, such a table would be even more problematic, with crew members orienting themselves in every possible direction around it, some upside down relative to others, which could feel subtly disunifying. The emotional geometry solution is a central, circular table. This form has no head, no foot, no sides. It is inherently egalitarian. When crew members anchor themselves around it, perhaps using soft foot restraints or conforming seats, they naturally form a circle, a universal symbol of unity and equality. The table itself becomes a focal point for connection, its shape actively promoting a sense of community and face-to-face engagement. It's not just a surface for holding food packs, it's a geometric tool for building team cohesion. For moments of solitude and privacy, the approach shifts entirely. In an environment where you are never truly alone, the need for a personal retreat becomes paramount. Leap units are the most obvious example, but they must be more than just enclosed closets for a sleeping bag. Emotional geometry dictates they be designed as nested nooks, small, enveloping pods that use curved, embracing walls to create a powerful sense of security and seclusion. The proportions are critical, a low, slightly compressed volume that feels cocoon-like and protective, a stark contrast to the open community areas. This isn't about confinement, it's about crafting a sanctuary. Within this pod, every element is an emotional anchor. A small, personalizable digital display for family photos, a soft, dimmable reading light, and perhaps a fabric surface instead of cold metal. These details transform a functional sleeping berth into a deeply personal haven, a place where an astronaut can truly disengage and recharge emotionally, surrounded by a geometry of comfort. The ultimate goal is this transformation of the purely functional into the profoundly emotional. Every handhold, every table, every partition is an opportunity to support not just the body, but the mind. A handhold shaped like a smooth, warm stone becomes a comforting point of contact in a vast metal world. A partition between workspaces, curved to diffuse sound and create a visual break, becomes a guardian of focus and privacy. This meticulous attention to detail ensures that the habitat doesn't feel like a collection of equipment, but a holistic environment where every single object has been considered for its role in the human experience. The furniture stops being something you simply use and starts being something you feel, an emotional anchor in the beautiful, weightless drift of life among the stars. Think for a moment about the most peaceful place you can remember. Perhaps it was a walk through a quiet forest with only the rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant call of a bird. Or maybe it was sitting by the ocean, listening to the rhythmic crash and pull of the waves. Now try to recall the most stressful sound you've ever heard. The relentless jackhammer on a city street, the high-pitched whine of a malfunctioning machine, or the overwhelming cacophony of a crowded, echoing room. This stark contrast isn't just about preference, it's a biological reality. Sound is a powerful, often primal force that shapes our emotional state from moment to moment, bypassing our conscious mind to speak directly to our nervous system. In the confined, metallic world of a space habitat, where the constant, non-negotiable hum of life support machinery is a fact of life, the acoustic environment becomes a critical front in the battle for psychological well-being. If left unmanaged, this auditory landscape of whirring fans and buzzing electronics becomes a form of chronic sensory assault, a background stressor that frays nerves, disrupts sleep, and erodes the sense of peace that emotional geometry strives so hard to create. This is why the science of acoustics and the art of soundscaping are not optional additions to space architecture. They are essential layers of the multisensory experience, working in concert with visual and tactile design to build a truly holistic sanctuary. The first line of defense is architectural acoustics, the physical manipulation of the habitat's surfaces to control how sound behaves. This is emotional geometry applied to the auditory realm. Every shape and material choice has a profound impact on the soundscape. Hard, flat, parallel surfaces, the kind often found in purely utilitarian designs, are an acoustic nightmare. They cause sound waves to bounce back and forth like a ping-pong ball, creating a harsh, reverberant, and confusing echo chamber where noises blend into an oppressive wall of sound. The solution lies in breaking up these flat planes with intentional geometry. Curved walls and ceilings are not just visually soft, they are acoustically brilliant. Their undulating forms act like gentle hills for sound waves, scattering and diffusing them in a multitude of directions rather than reflecting them directly. This prevents sharp echoes and creates a much softer, more diffuse auditory field that feels naturally absorbing and calm, much like the acoustic environment of a natural cave or a forest where sounds are softened by countless irregular surfaces. Complementing this geometric approach is the strategic use of sound-absorbing materials. This is where the tactile choices we discussed earlier reveal their dual purpose. Those fabric panels and textured wood composites aren't just there to be touched and seen. They are voracious consumers of unwanted noise. Their porous structures trap sound wave energy, converting it into minuscule amounts of heat and effectively preventing it from bouncing around the module. Deploying these materials strategically on ceilings and walls, particularly near the noisiest equipment, acts like placing acoustic sponges throughout the habitat, soaking up the mechanical din at its source and dramatically lowering the overall ambient volume. The emotional impact of this cannot be overstated. Reducing the baseline noise level is like turning down the volume on the body's stress response, allowing the nervous system to relax and making the entire environment feel more like a library and less like a factory floor. But achieving silence is not the goal. In fact, utter silence can be just as unnerving and unnatural as overwhelming noise. This is where the art of soundscaping enters the picture. Soundscaping is the intentional design of a background auditory environment, the careful addition of comforting, layered sounds to mask unpleasant noises and evoke specific emotional states. It's the difference between trying to sleep in a silent room where every creak and tick is amplified, and sleeping with a gentle, rhythmic fan that provides a consistent, soothing auditory blanket. In a space habitat, soundscaping systems could pipe in a carefully curated palette of ambient sounds tailored to the geometry and purpose of each module. A common area with flowing, organic architectural curves might be paired with the soft, bubbling sounds of a stream or the gentle rustle of wind through leaves, reinforcing the serene, naturalistic vibe of the space. A workout module designed with more dynamic, angular geometry might benefit from a low, energizing rhythm or a deep, resonant hum that promotes vitality and focus without being distracting. This multisensory alignment is the ultimate goal, creating a seamless experience where what you see, what you touch, and what you hear all tell the same emotional story. A curved, wooden-textured nook that looks and feels like a peaceful retreat becomes completely immersive when it also sounds like one, with the faint, soothing whisper of moving air. This cohesive approach ensures the environment feels intentionally crafted and deeply supportive, addressing the often overlooked auditory dimension of isolation. It proves that a truly comforting habitat isn't just a visually appealing shell. It is a carefully composed sensory experience that protects and nurtures the human spirit on every level, speaking to us through a language of form, light, and sound that we feel in our bones long before we process it with our mind. This profound human connection to the natural world is not a mere preference. It is an evolutionary imprint written into our very DNA. For millions of years, our survival and well-being were intrinsically tied to environments that provided shelter, resources, and safety. The protective canopy of a forest, the solid embrace of a cave, the open vista of a savanna. Our brains became hardwired to find comfort, curiosity, and a sense of rightness in the complex, non-repeating patterns of the living world. This deep-seated affinity is known as biophilia, and it is the powerful psychological engine that biomorphic design seeks to engage. In the utterly synthetic, metallic reality of a space habitat, severed from every sight, sound, and smell of nature, this innate longing for the organic doesn't disappear. It intensifies, becoming a silent source of psychological strain. Biomorphic architecture directly addresses this ache for the natural, not by building a greenhouse in every module, but by weaving the very language of nature, its forms, its patterns, its logic, into the walls, ceilings, and structures that surround the crew. It is a way of bringing the ghost of Earth aboard, providing a continuous, subconscious connection to the world we evolved to inhabit. The practical application of this principle is a masterclass in form meeting function. Nature, through eons of evolution, has arrived at shapes that are phenomenally efficient, incredibly strong, and beautifully lightweight solutions that human engineers often strive to emulate. The hexagon of a honeycomb is the perfect example. This six-sided pattern represents the most efficient way to partition a surface, minimizing material while maximizing strength and stability. It's a geometry found in beehives, basalt columns, and even the molecular structure of graphene. In space architecture, a honeycomb pattern isn't just a visually interesting texture on a wall panel. It can be the foundational structure of the panel itself, providing immense strength-to-weight ratio, which is the holy grail of spacecraft design. An astronaut floating next to a bulkhead with a honeycomb design isn't just looking at a clever engineering solution. They are subconsciously connecting to a pattern that feels inherently orderly, familiar, and natural. It's a form that satisfies both the engineer's spreadsheet and the human soul's need for comfort. We can look to more complex natural structures for even greater emotional and structural impact. Imagine the central spine of a large habitat module, not as a straight utilitarian truss, but as a branching, tree-like support column. This biomorphic form, reminiscent of the veins in a leaf or the limbs of an oak tree, does more than just hold up the ceiling. Psychologically, it transforms the entire space. The feeling of being underneath a branching structure is primal. It evokes the dappled light and protective shelter of a forest canopy, creating a profound sense of psychological refuge and safety. Structurally, this branching design is equally brilliant. It distributes weight and stress forces evenly along organic pathways, just as a tree distributes nutrients from its roots to its outermost leaves. This natural load-bearing logic often creates a structure that is more resilient and uses less material than a conventional box beam design. The crew member living and working in this space isn't just in a metal tube. They are in a place that feels, on a deep, instinctual level, both strong and sheltering. This approach extends to every scale, from the macro structure of a building down to the micro patterns on a surface. Walls could be designed with soft, undulating forms that mimic rolling sand dunes or smooth river stones, eliminating the harsh, anxiety-inducing sharpness of right-angled corners. Flooring, or the surface designated for movement, could be textured with fractal patterns that recall the intricate arrangement of lichen on a rock or the branching of a lightning bolt. Even the workflow of a habitat can be biomorphic. Instead of a grid-like layout of identical workstations, the interior could be organized more like a natural ecosystem, with central, open clearings for social gathering that organically give way to smaller, more private thickets for individual work and retreat. This creates an intuitive, flowing environment that feels less like a machine and more like a landscape, reducing the cognitive load required to navigate and use the space. By blending the principles of biology with the necessities of architecture, designers are able to create environments that are at once astonishingly futuristic and deeply, comfortingly familiar. They are building not just shelters but ecosystems for the human spirit, ensuring that even in the farthest reaches of the cosmos, we can still feel the echo of home. Yet this profound connection between geometry and feeling is not a universal language spoken in exactly the same way by everyone on Earth. Our emotional responses, while rooted in shared biology, are also profoundly shaped by the unique cultural lenses through which we view the world. A color that signifies joy in one society might represent mourning in another. A shape that feels protective and enclosing to some could evoke a sense of confinement and restriction to others. This means that the emotional geometry of a space habitat cannot be a monolithic, one-size-fits-all design imposed from a single cultural perspective. For a crew composed of individuals from across the globe, embarking on a years-long journey to Mars, the architecture must be as adaptable and inclusive as the international team it houses. It must move beyond merely avoiding offense and actively strive to celebrate and incorporate the diverse emotional landscapes of its inhabitants, recognizing that true psychological well-being in isolation is deeply tied to a sense of cultural identity and belonging. The most practical and powerful way to achieve this is through adaptable, modular design. Instead of building static, permanent walls and fixtures, future habitats could feature reconfigurable elements that the crew itself can rearrange. Imagine interior panels that can be detached and repositioned, or lightweight, geometric partitions that can be formed into new shapes to create temporary rooms or alcoves. This gives the crew a direct hand in shaping their own environment, allowing them to create spaces that suit their collective mood or cultural needs at any given time. A group might choose to arrange a common area into a large, open circle for a shared celebration, then later reconfigure the same space into smaller, more intimate clusters for quiet conversation or individual reflection. This level of agency is itself a powerful psychological tool, combating the helplessness that can come from living in a completely predetermined environment and allowing the habitat to organically evolve alongside the crew's changing social and emotional dynamics. Beyond physical modularity, emotional geometry can incorporate culturally resonant symbolic shapes and patterns directly into the architecture. This requires thoughtful collaboration with cultural experts and the crew members themselves long before a mission ever launches. A meditation or quiet contemplation space, for instance, might be designed around a universal geometric pattern like a mandala, a concentric design found in Hindu, Buddhist, and even Christian traditions that symbolizes the universe and aids in focus and spiritual centering. Its familiar, symmetrical form could provide a point of shared calm for people from many backgrounds. Meanwhile, social areas could be designed with neutral geometric foundations, but include dedicated zones for art installations and personal expression. These would be blank canvases where crew members could project digital art from their home countries, display traditional textiles, or even create soundscapes featuring music and natural sounds from their specific regions of Earth. A Canadian astronaut might fill their corner with the serene sounds of a boreal forest, while a colleague from Japan might project the elegant, minimalist lines of a Zen garden. This intentional inclusivity does far more than just decorate the walls. It actively weaves the rich tapestry of human culture into the very fabric of the starship. It ensures that the habitat supports not only individual well-being but also the critical harmony of the entire group. In the intense pressure cooker of a long-duration mission, small misunderstandings or feelings of cultural isolation can magnify into significant conflicts. By designing an environment that visibly values and makes space for each person's heritage, we send a powerful message of respect and equality. It tells every crew member that they are not just a passenger on this journey, but a vital and integral part of the community, with their unique emotional needs and cultural background acknowledged and honored. This cultural layer adds immense depth and responsibility to the architect's role. They are no longer just designers of physical space, but facilitators of human culture and psychological resilience. As we set our sights on multinational missions to distant worlds, this sensitivity moves from a nice-to-have feature to an absolute operational essential. The success of these ventures will depend as much on our ability to design for the human spirit in all its beautiful diversity as it will on our engineering prowess. We are not just building structures to survive the void, we are building the first true intercultural villages of humanity, and their geometry must be thoughtful enough to make everyone feel at home. This shift from intuition to evidence represents one of the most exciting advancements in the field, powered by a suite of sophisticated technological tools that allow designers to prototype feelings long before a single piece of metal is ever forged. The days of relying solely on blueprints and artist renderings to gauge the emotional impact of a space are fading fast. Today, architects and psychologists are partnering with software engineers to create immersive digital twins of their proposed habitats, using virtual reality to conduct the ultimate focus group, placing future inhabitants inside the design while it's still nothing more than lines of code. This isn't just a visual walkthrough, it's a full-body experience. A crew member can strap on a headset and actually float through a photorealistic, three-dimensional model of a Martian living quarters, getting a true sense of scale, proportion, and flow. They can test whether a handhold is intuitively placed, if a corridor feels inviting or claustrophobic, and if the sight lines from a workstation promote a sense of connection or isolation. This immediate, visceral feedback is invaluable, allowing designers to identify and rectify emotional flaws that would have been catastrophically expensive or even impossible to fix after construction began millions of miles from Earth. The insights gained go far beyond subjective opinion. Researchers are now integrating biometric sensors directly into these virtual reality experiences, transforming qualitative feeling into quantitative data. As a test subject explores a digital model, wireless sensors discreetly monitor their physiological responses, tracking heart rate variability, skin conductance, eye movement, and even brainwave patterns. This provides an objective, unfiltered window into their subconscious emotional state. The data might reveal that a particular angular design in a relaxation room causes a subtle but measurable spike in stress indicators, while a softly curving, biomorphic alternative prompts a significant dip in heart rate and an increase in alpha brainwaves, synonymous with a calm, meditative state. This biofeedback loop turns the design process into a form of scientific experimentation, where different geometric iterations can be /B tested not for their aesthetic appeal, but for their proven neurological impact. It moves the conversation from "I think this feels better" to "the data shows this design reduces stress by 20%. On the generative side of the process, artificial intelligence and algorithmic design are becoming indispensable creative partners. Instead of a designer manually sketching hundreds of minor variations on a wall panel or structural support, they can input a set of core parameters into a generative algorithm. These parameters are a fascinating blend of the pragmatic and the poetic. The program must maximize structural strength while minimizing weight, but it must also optimize for a target emotional outcome, such as foster serenity or promote alertness. The AI then explores thousands, even millions, of possible geometric solutions that meet these complex, often competing, goals. The results can be breathtakingly innovative, producing organic, complex forms that a human mind might never conceive of, yet are perfectly tuned to both the laws of physics and the nuances of human psychology. This isn't about replacing the architect, it's about augmenting their creativity with a powerful computational engine that can navigate a vast design space to find optimal solutions that balance engineering efficiency with profound human need. This powerful marriage of cutting-edge technology and deep empathy is forging a completely new frontier for architecture. It represents a fundamental shift from designing for the eye to designing for the entire human nervous system. We are no longer just building structures that we hope will feel right. We are engineering environments with a predictable, data-supported emotional resonance. This iterative, evidence-based approach dramatically de-risks the monumental investment of building in space, ensuring that the habitats we send into the cosmos are not only structurally sound, but are scientifically validated to support the mental well-being and social cohesion of the crews who will live within them. It's a profound collaboration between the cold, logical processing power of machines and the warm, complex reality of human feeling, all working in concert to build a future where our homes among the stars feel truly, authentically like home. But this vision of a habitat that breathes and shifts with its inhabitants requires moving far beyond the static structures we know today. It demands a new generation of smart materials and robotic systems that can physically reconfigure the environment itself. Imagine walls not as fixed barriers, but as layered composites embedded with shape memory alloys metals that can remember a predetermined form and return to it when heated with a tiny electrical current. At the command of a crew member seeking solitude, a section of a common area wall could gently curve inward, forming a secluded nook without the need for sliding doors or partitions. This same material could later relax back into a flat surface to open the space up for a group gathering, all happening silently and seamlessly. The very geometry of the room becomes a dynamic participant in daily life, sculpting itself to support the shifting emotional needs of the crew from moment to moment, hour to hour. The sensory layer of this adaptive environment will be just as responsive. Floors or the surfaces we designate for movement could be paved with piezoelectric crystals, materials that generate a small electrical charge when subjected to mechanical stress, like the gentle pressure of a hand gliding along a handhold or the push of a foot against a wall. This energy wouldn't need to be stored for major systems. Instead, it could be used right away to power subtle, immediate feedback. Picture drifting down a corridor, and as you reach out to guide yourself, the section of wall ahead lights up with a soft, welcoming glow that follows your path, illuminating your way and then fading gently after you pass. This creates an environment that feels truly alive and attentive, responding to your presence not with beeps or alarms, but with gentle, light-based cues that make navigation intuitive and even beautiful. The lighting itself could shift in color, temperature, and intensity based on the time of day or the activity detected in a module, reinforcing circadian rhythms and signaling the appropriate mood for work, socializing, or rest. The greatest psychological benefit of this constant, gentle evolution is its powerful defense against monotony. On a mission lasting years, perhaps to Mars and back, the risk of sensory and environmental fatigue is one of the most significant threats to crew morale. The same four walls day after day, no matter how well designed initially, can eventually become a source of subconscious strain. A responsive habitat actively fights this. The room you wake up in on Monday might have a different ceiling height and lighting tone than the same room on Friday, thanks to slow, programmed geometric shifts that introduce just enough variation to keep the environment feeling fresh and engaging. This isn't change for change's sake. It's a deliberate strategy to mimic the subtle, constant variation we experience on Earth with changing weather, light, and seasons. It provides a stream of gentle novelty that stimulates the mind and prevents the stagnation that can come from utter predictability. This represents the ultimate convergence of form, function, and feeling. We are moving from architecture as a noun, a static, finished object, to architecture as a verb, a living process that continuously interacts with its inhabitants. It's a holistic system where the emotional geometry is no longer permanently etched in metal and plastic, but is instead a dynamic dance between human need and technological response. The habitat becomes a partner in well-being, an intelligent shell that learns and adapts, ensuring that the emotional gravity we work so hard to design remains strong and supportive throughout the entire epic journey. This ability to shape our inner state through our surroundings brings us to a profound and necessary question, one that moves beyond the how and into the why. Who ultimately holds the pen when we are drafting the emotional blueprint for a society off-world? The power inherent in emotional geometry is subtle yet immense. It operates on a subconscious level, guiding feelings and behaviors often without our explicit awareness. This immediately raises critical concerns about autonomy and the very nature of consent when your entire environment is a carefully crafted experience. Should the architects, however well-intentioned, have the authority to design spaces that inevitably, and sometimes irresistibly, influence the mood and mental state of the inhabitants? This isn't a question of malicious intent, but rather one of philosophical boundaries. Is it fundamentally different from a city planner designing a peaceful park versus a bustling market square? The distinction lies in the totality of the environment and the inability to simply walk away. In a space habitat, every single module, every corridor, every private quarter is designed. There is no exit into an undesignated natural world. The architecture is the entire world. This concentration of influence demands a much higher ethical standard. Consider a practical and troubling dilemma. Imagine a habitat module designed for rest and recovery, its every curve and hue calibrated to induce a state of deep calm. This seems like an unalloyed good, but what if an astronaut needs to perform a complex emergency repair in that very same space? The same calming geometries that promote sleep might actively work against the sharp, hyper-vigilant focus required to fix a critical life support component. The design meant to support well-being could inadvertently compromise safety, or ponder the use of certain colors or patterns that are universally calming for most, but which might trigger anxiety or negative associations for an individual based on their unique personal history. Does the need for a cohesive, majority-approved design override the emotional needs of that one person? These are not abstract thought experiments. They are concrete operational dilemmas that will determine the daily lived experience of spacefarers. The goal of reducing stress is noble, but if it comes at the cost of dulling critical alertness or invalidating personal emotional responses, we have traded one problem for another, potentially more dangerous one. Navigating this ethical minefield cannot be the sole responsibility of the architects or engineers. It demands a new kind of interdisciplinary dialogue, a council of creators that must include not just designers, but psychologists who understand the nuances of influence, ethicists who can map the philosophical terrain, and most importantly, the astronauts and crew members themselves, the people who will ultimately live within these walls. Their lived experience and personal testimony are the most crucial data points in this process. This collaborative approach ensures that the emotional design is not something done to the crew, but something developed with them. It transforms the inhabitants from passive subjects of an experiment into active co-authors of their own environment. This leads to the twin pillars of ethical emotional design: transparency and agency. Crews must be fully educated on the principles behind their habitat's design. They should understand why the walls curve a certain way, what the lighting cycle is intended to do, and how the acoustics are meant to affect them. This knowledge demystifies the environment and returns a measure of power to the individual, allowing them to intellectually engage with the design rather than just be subconsciously manipulated by it. Furthermore, they must have tangible agency to modify their immediate surroundings. This could range from personal control over the lighting and sound in their private quarters to communal decisions about reconfiguring a common area's layout for a different purpose. The ability to alter one's environment is a fundamental psychological need, a critical antidote to feelings of helplessness and confinement. Providing dials to turn and settings to change, both literally and figuratively, empowers the crew and ensures the architecture supports their autonomy rather than undermining it. This ethical layer is what separates a humane habitat from a gilded cage, reminding us that the ultimate goal of emotional geometry is not to control human flourishing, but to create the conditions that best allow it to unfold on its own terms. This fusion of disciplines might seem like a modern innovation, but it's actually a return to a much older way of seeing the world, one where the artist and the scientist were not separate entities but different facets of a single curious mind. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, who saw no boundary between the precise anatomy of a human heart and the flowing beauty of a painting. His work was a seamless blend of empirical observation and profound artistry. For centuries, that connection was severed. We built silos separating the hard sciences of engineering and physics from the soft arts of design and emotion, treating them as opposing forces rather than complementary partners. The result, especially in early spaceflight, was an architecture of pure utility, brilliantly functional machines that often felt cold and emotionally sterile to the humans living inside them. We prioritized the survival of the body while largely ignoring the needs of the mind and spirit. The field of emotional geometry represents a powerful and necessary reconciliation, a conscious effort to bring these two worlds back together to solve a problem that neither can address alone. The mechanics of this collaboration are as fascinating as the results. It begins not with a drafting table, but with a conversation, a truly multidisciplinary dialogue where each expert speaks a different language but works toward a shared goal. The neuroscientist enters the room with data, charts, and brain scans. They can explain with remarkable precision how a specific geometric pattern, like a fractal, can lower cortisol levels and reduce activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. They provide the empirical evidence, the why, demonstrating that a curved form isn't just aesthetically pleasing. It has a measurable, calming effect on the human nervous system. The architect then takes this knowledge and begins to translate it into three-dimensional form, asking practical questions about space, volume, and structure. But it is the artist who often provides the crucial, intuitive leap. Unburdened by the constraints of load-bearing calculations or material science, the artist asks a different set of questions. What does this space feel like? What story does it tell? How does the light caress this surface? They might look at a bulky, necessary structural support column and see not an obstruction, but an opportunity, suggesting it be reimagined as a sculptural element, perhaps a gracefully branching form inspired by a tree that transforms a mere pillar into a focal point of beauty and natural connection. This synergy leads to groundbreaking innovations that would be impossible in isolation. One of the most compelling is the practice of emotional mapping. Here, the team creates a virtual reality model of a proposed habitat module. Test subjects, often astronauts in training, are immersed in this digital space while wearing a suite of biometric sensors. As they virtually float through different geometric configurations, a room with high, vaulted ceilings versus one with a low, intimate dome, a corridor with sharp angles versus one with soft, flowing curves, the scientists monitor their physiological responses in real time. The artist and architect observe this live data feed, watching as heart rates dip, skin conductance changes, and brainwave patterns shift in response to the digital environment. This process turns subjective feeling into an objective design tool. The team isn't just guessing which design feels better. They are collecting concrete data on which geometry genuinely calms the human organism. The artist uses this feedback to refine the aesthetic elements, the architect to adjust the proportions, and the engineer to ensure the chosen form is still structurally sound. It's a continuous, iterative loop where human emotion directly informs the engineering blueprint. The ultimate success of this collaboration is measured in the creation of holistic solutions that serve every facet of human need. A perfect example is the design of a window or viewport. An engineer working alone might see a window as a structural liability, a point of weakness in the hull that requires complex, heavy reinforcement. Their initial impulse might be to minimize it or remove it altogether. The neuroscientist would immediately counter with data on the psychological necessity of external views, crucial for preventing sensory deprivation and maintaining connection to Earth. The artist then steps in to bridge the gap. They wouldn't just argue for a window, they would design the experience of it. They might conceive of the viewport not as a simple porthole, but as a deep, encompassing alcove with softly curved sides that frame the view of Earth like a cherished painting, with integrated handholds that allow an astronaut to anchor themselves comfortably for long periods of contemplation. They might suggest the surrounding surfaces be made of a warm, tactile material, making the entire nook a multisensory refuge. The engineer, in turn, can then work on innovative ways to reinforce this beautiful, necessary feature without compromising safety. The final design is a masterpiece of compromise and creativity, strong, functional, and profoundly soul-nourishing. This model of cooperation does more than just produce better habitats. It fundamentally changes how we approach the entire challenge of living in space. It shatters the old paradigm that technical rigor and human warmth are mutually exclusive. By breaking down the artificial walls between disciplines, we unlock a deeper, more integrated form of innovation. We learn that a structure's strength is not just in the thickness of its hull, but in its ability to strengthen the human spirit inside it. This partnership proves that the future of space exploration isn't just about tougher alloys and more efficient engines. It's about wiser collaborations where a poet's insight is given the same weight as a physicist's equation, and where our first homes beyond Earth are built not just with precision, but with profound compassion and artistry. Since we cannot simply manufacture gravity within the cold, hard vacuum of space, we must instead become masters of illusion, using every tool of architecture and design to craft a beautiful and benevolent lie for the human brain. This is where emotional geometry transforms into a form of sensory magic, creating a persuasive simulation of the gravitational forces we left behind on Earth. The techniques are subtle yet profoundly effective, targeting our deepest visual and tactile instincts to impose order on the inherent chaos of weightlessness. One of the most powerful tools is the strategic use of light. Designers can install lighting systems that create a distinct gradient, growing brighter and more intense toward what is designated as the ceiling of a module and gradually dimming toward the floor. This simple trick leverages our lifelong association of light coming from above, just like the sun, instinctively encouraging brain to interpret the brighter area as up and the darker area as down. This visual hierarchy provides a crucial reference point, a constant, silent reminder of orientation that dramatically reduces the vertigo and spatial confusion that can plague astronauts, especially in the early days of a mission. The deception continues underfoot, or more accurately, on the surfaces we designate for movement. While an astronaut's feet may never truly bear weight, their eyes and hands are constantly searching for clues. Textured flooring patterns can be used to create a powerful illusion of solidity and traction. A distinct, perhaps slightly rougher material with a linear pattern that runs the length of a corridor can visually define a primary path of travel, making it feel like a trustworthy sidewalk in zero gravity. This textured pathway acts as a visual handrail for the eyes, guiding movement and reinforcing the idea of a stable plane. The brain, desperate for a familiar framework, eagerly accepts this visual cue, translating it into a subconscious feeling of stability that helps to quell the underlying anxiety of floating. Perhaps the most ingenious illusions are crafted through oriented geometries, deliberate architectural shapes that lead the eye and suggest a forced perspective. Walls can be designed with subtle converging lines that draw the gaze toward a central vanishing point, much like looking down a long hallway on Earth, creating a powerful sense of depth and direction. Recessed lighting fixtures can be aligned in rows that emphasize this perspective, further reinforcing the intended path. Even the placement of storage lockers, control panels, and handholds can be arranged in a way that creates a clear visual up and down. By aligning all these elements consistently throughout the habitat, architects build a cohesive visual language that the brain can learn. And trust, this consistency is key. It turns a collection of individual tricks into a unified, believable reality that makes the entire environment feel intentional, navigable, and most importantly, safe. A stunning example of this artistic deception is the use of trompe-l'œil murals. This classic technique, which means deceive the eye in French, involves painting a hyper-realistic image that creates the illusion of a three-dimensional space on a flat surface. Imagine a large mural on the end wall of a module depicting a serene, sun-drenched landscape receding toward a distant horizon. For an astronaut floating in the center of the room, this painting would provide a profound visual anchor, a simulated horizon line that the vestibular system can latch onto to regain its bearings. The deep perspective of the landscape would trick the mind into perceiving greater depth and distance than actually exists, making the confined module feel instantly more expansive and less claustrophobic. This isn't just decoration, it's a psychological life raft, a window to an imaginary world that provides a moment of profound cognitive and emotional relief from the metal confines of the ship. This entire practice of creating gravitational illusions is a fascinating ethical and practical balancing act. It is a deliberate, calculated deception, yet its purpose is entirely benevolent to support human well-being. It demonstrates that when we cannot change the harsh physical reality of space, we can instead change our perception of it through clever design. This clever blend of artistic trickery and psychological understanding offers a temporary but vital substitute for the gravitational constants our bodies and minds crave. It proves that feeling grounded is not always a matter of physics, but can be a carefully constructed state of mind, allowing us to carry a comforting echo of Earth's familiar pull with us on our journey to the stars. Mars presents a design challenge unlike any other environment we've yet confronted. A world with just enough gravity to tease familiarity, yet not enough to feel truly Earth-like, combined with an isolation so profound that the concept of a quick return home vanishes entirely. This harsh reality demands an emotional geometry that doesn't just comfort, but also fortifies the human spirit against a profound sense of remoteness. The conceptual habitats being designed for the Red Planet are masterclasses in this adaptive approach, moving beyond the pure functionalism of early orbital stations to create environments that actively nurture psychological resilience. They represent a fascinating negotiation between the brutal physical constraints of an alien world and the deep, non-negotiable emotional needs of its human inhabitants, proving that the principles of comforting design are not bound by Earth's atmosphere. One of the most compelling strategies emerging from these concepts is the deliberate juxtaposition of expansive communal spaces with intensely personal, protective private quarters. Vast, domed common areas are a recurring theme, and for a powerful psychological reason. Their soaring, vaulted curves do more than just provide structural integrity against the low-pressure Martian environment. They perform a critical emotional function by creating a visceral sense of openness and grandeur. For settlers living under the constant knowledge of a thin, invisible dome separating them from a lethal outside world, an architectural design that pushes the ceiling upward and outward is a direct countermeasure to the looming threat of claustrophobia. These spaces, often envisioned with large, transparent panels or even entire walls made of reinforced materials, would flood the interior with natural Martian light and offer breathtaking views of the rusty landscape and the distant sun. This connection to the outside, however alien, is vital. It prevents the habitat from feeling like a sealed tomb and instead frames the settlement as an outpost within a new world, fostering a sense of purpose and awe rather than confinement and fear. This stands in stark contrast to the design philosophy for private sleeping and living quarters. Here, the emotional geometry shifts dramatically from the expansive to the intimate. Designers are exploring concepts for snug, cave-like pods with lower, gently curved ceilings and softer, more enveloping walls. This isn't about creating cramped conditions, it's about leveraging our ancient, hardwired sense of security. There's a profound psychological comfort found in a small, protected space, a feeling of safety and retreat that harkens back to the shelters of our distant ancestors. After a day spent in the vastness of a common dome or working in a high-ceilinged laboratory, returning to a personal nook that feels secure, private, and physically embracing provides a necessary emotional counterbalance. It becomes a sanctuary for decompression, a place where an individual can truly let their guard down and feel sheltered from the immense pressures of building a new civilization on a foreign planet. This intentional variation in spatial experience, the exhilarating awe of the public dome versus the secure embrace of the private den, creates a healthy emotional rhythm for daily life, preventing the monotony that can be so damaging in isolated environments. Perhaps one of the most innovative and psychologically astute aspects of these Martian concepts is the planned use of local materials, particularly Martian regolith. The idea is to process the ubiquitous red dust and rock into composite building materials, literally weaving the fabric of the new world into the walls of the habitat. Beyond the obvious practical benefits of using readily available resources, this approach carries immense emotional weight. Imagine the interior walls of a module, not painted a sterile white or a generic beige, but finished with a textured, terracotta-hued panel made from the very soil outside. The color palette of the entire habitat would naturally reflect the warm, rusty tones of the Martian landscape, creating a continuous visual dialogue between the inside and outside. This does something remarkable. It fosters a sense of connection and belonging to Mars itself, instead of feeling like a foreign object placed upon an alien landscape. The habitat begins to feel like it grew from it. This subtle shift is crucial for long-term settlement. It encourages settlers to see Mars not as a hostile environment to be permanently barricaded against, but as their new home, a world they are literally building with their own hands and from its own Earth. This use of local materials transforms the architecture from a reminder of separation into a bridge toward integration and acceptance. Imagine for a moment being able to step inside a space station years before it's ever built, to float through its corridors and truly feel what it's like to live there, not as an abstract idea, but as a full sensory experience. This is no longer the realm of science fiction. It's the practical reality offered by virtual reality technology, and it's revolutionizing how we design for human emotion in space. Virtual reality acts as the ultimate empathy machine for architects. giving them the unprecedented ability to see through the eyes of future astronauts long before a single piece of hardware is ever fabricated. By creating intensely immersive digital prototypes of these habitats, designers can move beyond blueprints and theoretical models to gather direct, visceral feedback on how a space actually feels to inhabit. This process transforms subjective guesswork into actionable data, allowing teams to identify and address potential sources of stress, disorientation, or anxiety that might not be apparent on a two-dimensional screen. A designer might believe a certain module layout is perfectly logical, but only when a test subject virtually floats through it and reports a sudden, unexpected feeling of claustrophobia in a particular section does the need for change become undeniably clear. This isn't just about avoiding design flaws, it's about proactively crafting environments that actively contribute to psychological well-being from the very first draft. The real power of this approach lies in its capacity for rapid, risk-free iteration. In the past, making a significant change to a habitat's design after construction began was prohibitively expensive, if not impossible. Now, if a corridor feels too narrow and restrictive, an architect can simply put on a headset, enter the virtual model, and widen the passageway with a few clicks. They can then immediately have another user test the revised version to see if the feeling of confinement has been alleviated. This iterative loop of testing and refining can happen dozens of times in a single day, at virtually no cost, until the design evokes the desired emotional response. The same process applies to every element of emotional geometry. Does a curved ceiling in the common area actually foster a sense of community, or does it feel oddly imposing? Is the lighting gradient in the sleep pod gentle enough to encourage relaxation, or is it too stark? VR provides answers to these deeply subjective questions with concrete, experiential evidence. This method dramatically de-risks the entire design process, ensuring that the multi-billion-dollar structures we send into space are not only engineering marvels, but are also scientifically validated to support mental health. Beyond simple self-reporting, the integration of biometric feedback takes this testing to a truly scientific level. Test subjects exploring these digital habitats can be outfitted with lightweight sensors that monitor physiological indicators of their emotional state in real time. A sudden increase in heart rate or a spike in skin conductance as a user navigates a particular angular junction provides an objective, unfiltered data point that something in that design is triggering a subconscious stress response. Conversely, a measurable dip in heart rate and an increase in alpha brainwaves as someone enters a biomorphically designed lounge offers concrete proof that the space is achieving its goal of promoting calm. This biofeedback turns emotional response from a matter of opinion into a matter of physiology, giving designers a powerful dashboard of human reaction that guides their choices. It's a profound partnership between the intuitive art of design and the empirical rigor of science, all focused on optimizing the human experience. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of this technology is its power to democratize the design process. The psychological needs of a diverse, international crew cannot be fully understood by a homogeneous design team on Earth. VR shatters this barrier by allowing astronauts, psychologists, and even family members from all over the world to virtually inhabit the proposed designs and contribute their perspectives. A crew member from one cultural background might find a particular communal layout perfectly inviting, while another might feel it lacks sufficient privacy. By gathering this wide range of feedback during the design phase, architects can create more adaptable, inclusive, and culturally sensitive environments that truly serve everyone who will live within them. This collaborative process ensures the final habitat is shaped not by a single vision, but by a chorus of human experience, making it a home built for all of humanity, not just a select few. In this way, virtual reality does more than test designs. It builds consensus and fosters a shared sense of ownership over our future homes among the stars, long before we ever leave the ground. But this human touch goes far beyond a simple digital photo frame on a desk. Imagine entire walls that are dynamic, high-resolution digital canvases, not just for displaying pre-loaded images of earthly forests or beaches, but for creating entirely new art. An astronaut with a passion for painting could use a tablet to craft a swirling, colorful abstract piece, and then have it span an entire bulkhead, transforming a sterile corridor into their own personal gallery. Another crew member, perhaps a musician, might compose a piece of music that is then translated into a flowing, visual representation of sound waves that dances across the ceiling of their quarters as the piece plays. This isn't mere customization, it is deep personalization, a profound act of imprinting one's identity and creativity onto the environment. It allows the inhabitants to become active co-creators of their world, not just passive residents. These digital murals can also be shared and collaborative. The entire crew could decide to create a collective artwork, an ever-evolving tapestry that reflects their shared journey, inside jokes or milestones past. This shared creative act becomes a powerful bonding ritual, strengthening the social fabric of the group and creating a visual history of their mission that is far more meaningful than any official log entry. The role of art extends into the very architecture through the use of sculptural elements. In a world of flat panels and right angles, a single, beautifully crafted sculptural form can serve as a powerful emotional landmark. Picture a gracefully twisting sculpture made from a lightweight, 3D printed composite material, mounted in the center of a common area. Its organic, flowing form provides a stunning visual break from the surrounding technological pragmatism, a focal point that invites contemplation and wonder. It has no functional purpose other than to be beautiful, and that is its entire function, to remind the crew that their humanity, their need for aesthetic nourishment, is valued just as highly as their technical skills. This sculpture could even be functional art, or what designers call artistics. A handrail could be sculpted to feel like a smooth, polished river stone, satisfying the hand in a way a cold metal bar never could. A structural column could be designed to branch like a tree, providing both essential support and a subconscious connection to the natural world left behind. These elements prove that beauty and utility are not mutually exclusive. They can be fused into a single, purposeful whole. This integration of art directly counters one of the most pernicious psychological challenges of long-duration spaceflight: environmental monotony. The human brain is wired to seek novelty and variation. It's a key component of our mental well-being. In a habitat where every day looks the same and every surface is identical, the mind can begin to starve for new stimuli, leading to a state of lethargy and depression often called space fog. Art acts as the ultimate antidote to this monotony. A changeable digital display ensures the visual environment is never static. A crew member can wake up and choose a new theme for their living pod, perhaps a calming Van Gogh-inspired starry night one week, and a vibrant, energetic pattern of geometric shapes the next. This ability to control and refresh their visual surroundings is a critical tool for self-regulation, allowing individuals to tailor their environment to their shifting moods and needs. It gives them agency in a situation where so much is controlled and predetermined, fighting the sense of helplessness that can accompany extreme isolation. The habitat ceases to be a static, impersonal machine and becomes a living, breathing partner in their daily emotional life, Ultimately, this philosophy represents a fundamental shift in our understanding of what a space habitat is for. For decades, the primary goal was survival, to create a pressurized, temperature-controlled box that kept humans alive in a lethal environment. We are now maturing toward a new goal: thriving. We recognize that a successful mission is not just measured by the scientific data collected, but by the psychological health of the crew that collects it. By weaving art and personalization into the very fabric of the design, we acknowledge that a home is not defined by its walls, but by the lives and stories contained within them. The curved wall is no longer just a structural feature chosen for its calming properties. It becomes a canvas for a family portrait. The smooth, biomorphic handhold is not just an ergonomic detail. It is a small piece of art that brings a moment of quiet joy with every touch. This transforms the habitat from a machine for living into a true home, a sanctuary of identity and memory, personally enriched and humanized by the extraordinary people who have chosen to live within it. Imagine a future where an astronaut, feeling the subtle creep of isolation after weeks in transit, doesn't just grit their teeth and bear it. Instead, they consciously make their way to a specific module in their habitat, one with a softly curving, wood-textured alcove and a dynamic light panel programmed to mimic a terrestrial sunset. They know from their training that spending 20 minutes in this intentionally designed space will actively lower their cortisol levels and ease the feeling of loneliness. This is the next frontier of human space habitation, not just designing environments that influence our emotions, but educating the inhabitants themselves on how to harness that power for their own psychological self-care. We are moving beyond the concept of astronauts as passive occupants of a machine and toward a model where they are savvy, empowered navigators of their own inner space, using the architecture around them as a deliberate tool for maintaining mental and emotional balance. This training would fundamentally be a masterclass in what we might call emotional geography, the practice of mapping the habitat not by its functional purpose, like galley or lab, but by its emotional resonance and potential. Crew members would learn to identify which zones are engineered for specific psychological states. They would understand that the high-ceilinged, brightly lit module with angular, dynamic design elements isn't just the robotics workshop. It's a space that promotes alertness, cognitive focus, and energetic collaboration. Conversely, they'd know that the smaller, domed chamber with fractal-patterned walls and sound-dampening fabrics is the optimal retreat for reducing anxiety and finding a moment of quiet contemplation. This knowledge transforms their relationship with their surroundings from one of happenstance to one of intention. A crew member struggling with concentration wouldn't just feel frustrated. They would have the agency to relocate to an environment scientifically designed to support deep work, effectively using architecture as a non-pharmaceutical cognitive aid. The most powerful tool for imparting this knowledge would undoubtedly be virtual reality, used not just for design but for education. Before a mission even launches, crews could engage in immersive VR simulations of their specific habitat. But instead of just learning the location of equipment, they would embark on guided tours of their emotional landscape. A virtual guide might point out, "Notice how this corridor's gentle curve and rhythmic lighting pattern creates a calming transition from the social areas to the private quarters," or "The blue light spectrum in this workstation is tuned to suppress melatonin, ideal for your night shift, but a space to avoid 2 hours before you plan to sleep." These simulations could even include interactive challenges, like being tasked with identifying the best environment to decompress after a simulated high-stress emergency, allowing astronauts to practice emotional self-regulation in a risk-free setting. This pre-flight familiarization would mean that on their first real day aboard, the habitat already feels like a known and understandable partner in their well-being. This proactive approach fundamentally shifts the paradigm of mental health support in extreme environments. Traditionally, psychological support has often been reactive, addressing issues like anxiety or interpersonal conflict after they arise. Training crews in emotional geography equips them with a preventative toolkit. They learn to read their own emotional states and the architectural remedies available to them, allowing them to engage in ongoing self-maintenance. It fosters a profound sense of agency and control, which are themselves powerful antidotes to the helplessness that can accompany confinement and isolation. The habitat is no longer a static container that either helps or hinders. It becomes an interactive system. The walls, the light, the sound, and the geometry become an extension of the crew's own psychological resilience, a collaborator in the monumental task of staying not just physically healthy, but mentally and emotionally whole on the long and lonely road between worlds. When we think about the long-term survival of a space habitat, our minds naturally jump to the physical systems, the integrity of the hull, the reliability of the oxygen generators, the steadfastness of the radiation shielding. But there is a profound psychological dimension to sustainability that is just as critical. A habitat that feels fragile, or one where every minor malfunction triggers a complex and daunting repair process, becomes a constant, low-grade source of anxiety for its crew. The environment itself whispers a message of precarity, undermining the very sense of security that emotional geometry works so hard to build. This is why the principles of sustainability, durability, repairability, and efficiency are not just engineering metrics, they are fundamental components of psychological well-being. A design that is built to last and easy to maintain does more than just keep the air breathable. It breathes confidence into the daily lives of the astronauts, assuring them that their home is a resilient partner in their journey, not a fragile eggshell threatening to crack. This is where the beauty of modular geometry comes into play, serving as a perfect fusion of practical and emotional intelligence. Imagine a habitat constructed not as a single, monolithic structure, but as a series of interconnected, standardized units like cosmic Lego bricks. Each module has a specific function, and its geometry is designed for both its purpose and its potential for replacement. If a critical component in the water reclamation system fails, the crew doesn't face the terrifying prospect of cutting into a sealed wall and risking a catastrophic decompression. Instead, they can simply detach the entire water reclamation module along its predefined seams and replace it with an identical spare unit stored on board. The repair becomes a straightforward, almost routine procedure rather than a life or death emergency. This modular approach does something remarkable for the crew's psyche. It transforms potential disasters into manageable problems. The anxiety of "what if something breaks" is replaced by the confident knowledge that, when something breaks, we have a plan. This sense of preparedness and control is a powerful emotional anchor, reducing the background stress of living in an inherently risky environment and allowing the crew to focus their mental energy on exploration and discovery, not mere survival. Furthermore, the very materials we choose to build these habitats carry a deep emotional resonance that extends far beyond their structural properties. For decades, the aesthetic of space travel has been dominated by cold, industrial materials, polished metals, stark white composites, and the sterile gleam of functionality. But what if the walls around you weren't just cold barriers against the void, but were crafted from resources harvested in situ, from the very world you're trying to call home? On Mars, this could mean building with regolith composites, creating structures with the warm, rusty hues of the Martian soil itself. In orbit, it might involve using polymers derived from recycled mission waste, processed and reformed into new panels and parts. Using these renewable, local materials does more than just solve a logistics problem. It creates a powerful narrative of harmony and integration. The habitat stops being a foreign object placed upon a landscape and starts to feel like an extension of it. This fosters a profound sense of belonging and responsibility, a feeling that you are not just visiting this world, but are learning to live with it, using its gifts wisely and respectfully. This connection to place is a deeply human emotional need, and sustainable design fulfills it by weaving the story of the environment directly into the architecture. This holistic view culminates in the concept of closed-loop systems, which represent the ultimate expression of a sustainable and emotionally intelligent habitat. A closed-loop system is one where nothing is truly wasted. Water is purified and reused endlessly. Carbon dioxide is scrubbed from the air and converted back into oxygen. Organic waste is composted to nourish hydroponic gardens. Living within such a system is a continuous, tangible lesson in interdependence and caretaking. Astronauts are not just consumers of resources. They are active stewards in a tiny, fragile ecosystem that sustains them. This daily practice creates a powerful emotional feedback loop. The act of tending to the air-purifying plants or monitoring the water recyclers is no longer just a chore on a checklist. It becomes a ritual of nurturing the very environment that nurtures them. This fosters a profound sense of purpose and harmony, countering the feelings of isolation and disconnection. The habitat is no longer a machine that provides for them, but a living, breathing partnership. In this way, sustainability transcends its practical origins and becomes an emotional imperative. It's the understanding that our long-term well-being is inextricably tied to the resilience and health of the systems we depend on, making the act of preservation a direct act of self-care, a daily reaffirmation of life itself in the vast and silent cosmos. The journey we've taken through the emotional geometry of space architecture reveals a truth far greater than a simple design philosophy. It is, in essence, a new chapter in the story of human exploration. For centuries, our quest has been outward, focused on overcoming the physical barriers of distance and environment. We built stronger rockets, more resilient suits, and more sophisticated life support systems, all magnificent achievements that have brought us to the threshold of becoming an interplanetary species. But this journey has also taught us a humbling lesson, that the most formidable frontier we must cross is not outside us, but within. The profound isolation, the sensory deprivation, the aching absence of earthly cues, these are the silent adversaries that no amount of engineering alone can defeat. Emotional geometry is our answer to this inner challenge. It is the deliberate, compassionate, and brilliant effort to design for the human spirit, to ensure that as we venture into the cosmos, we do not lose the very essence of what makes us human along the way. This approach represents a fundamental maturation in our thinking. We are moving from an architecture of mere survival to an architecture of profound well-being. It's the recognition that a successful mission is not measured solely by the data collected or the rocks sampled, but by the psychological health of the people who accomplish those feats. A crew that feels grounded, connected, and inspired will invariably be more creative, more collaborative, and more resilient in the face of the inevitable unforeseen challenges. By weaving together the intuitive wisdom of art, the empirical rigor of psychology, and the boundless potential of technology, we are learning to build environments that act as silent partners in well-being. These habitats do not shout their intentions. They whisper comfort through the curve of a corridor. They offer stability through the gradient of light on a wall, and they provide solace through the personal art on a digital canvas. They create a gravity of the soul, a tangible sense of place and belonging that holds us fast even when our bodies float free. As we stand on the precipice of venturing to Mars and establishing a permanent presence beyond Earth, this lesson must be at the core of every blueprint, every material choice, and every line of code. The cold, utilitarian designs of the past served a vital purpose in getting us this far, but they are not the foundation upon which we will build a future. We must carry forward the understanding that a starship is more than a vessel, it is a village. A Martian habitat is more than a base, it is a home. The curves, the colors, the light, and the sound are not frivolous additions. They are the essential ingredients for crafting a new human experience in the universe, one where we don't just endure the stars, but we learn to sing among them. This is our next giant leap, to build not only with steel and silicon, but with empathy and hope, creating sanctuaries of humanity wherever our curiosity may lead us.